The very first camera I ever owned was a Canon. It was a Canon 80D, and I remember I worked a part-time job at a restaurant and I was a server, and it was a brutal environment. I didn't like it at all, but I did it in order to save up money while I was in university in order to purchase my first camera. Originally, I think I had purchased it thinking that I would eventually upgrade to like a Nikon or something, because at the time they were superior in photo, I think. Yeah, I know. I love that camera. I love the ergonomics. It felt cool. I could get everything I wanted out of it. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever need to change. But eventually, you know, when you start shooting more video and you want higher quality, you gotta upgrade. So I ended up upgrading into the EOS R. I purchased 2 of them, actually. And yeah, those were my main workhorses. I eventually upgraded to an R6 Mark II and the R5. But the more and more we got into filmmaking, there was always just something that just didn't feel right. Canon cameras are typically more photo focused, especially the DSLR sort of mirrorless world. And in order to get the real quality, you kind of have to jump into their cinema line. So I think that's why they introduced the C70 and the C80 in order to sort of bridge that gap. And then came the Sony Fx3. Honestly, if you had asked me 2 years ago, I don't think I ever would have jumped ship to Sony. I loved Canon, I loved their colors. The quality just wasn't up to par, in my opinion, compared to Canon cameras. But here we are, shooting on an FX3, and I just placed an order for a second one. Now, you might be wondering why I switched to the Sony FX3. Reason number one, I was struggling a lot in low light with Canon. So there was a lot of grainy shots I was getting. I started getting a lot of events and sort of concerts for gigs and recap videos like that. And I noticed that even when there was a little bit of grain, it wasn't like a very polished grain. It just ended up not being good. I didn't like the Canon grain. I also felt like I couldn't really pull the colors. The C-Log, I think when you get to a higher level of C-Log, like the cinema line of C-Log, it can be pretty good, but I just found that I really struggled pulling colors. The second reason was I was honestly just seeing all my favorite creators switch to the Sony FX3 and posting stuff, and I would see other creators that I didn't know that were creating phenomenal work with the FX3, and I would just wonder, man, like, I should be able to create this with a Canon, and honestly, you can, but there was just something about it that just felt like it was just vastly out of the leagues of what I had at the moment. Honestly, that's when I started thinking about it. A lot of documentaries that we're shooting here in Manitoba were using the Sony system. So everyone was getting an FX3 or an FX6. I really wanted to familiarize myself with that system, and it would also be a very good investment if ever other companies wanted to, for example, hire us to produce a documentary. We could just rent out our own gear. And so there was a lot of positives that were leading towards getting a Sony. I purchased the Sony FX3 mid last year. I kid you not, the moment I got it, I opened the box, I shot a handful of footage with it, and I immediately texted the company, or I called them, and I asked them, hey, I've only used this for like not even 30 minutes of footage. I don't know if I like this camera. Would you be open for me returning it? And they agreed to it. And I sat there. I was completely like distraught. I was like, I just wasted so much money on this camera. The time between I get to return this camera is sort of, you know, going away. And honestly, I panicked. Like, it was not looking good at all. And so I was very, very scared. I ended up keeping the camera. By some miracle, I barely used it. I would only use it on personal shoots for Vince Blaze. I used it in Pinawa when we went on a hike with my friend Raymond. And I would primarily just use it for things that I knew weren't necessarily high stakes, in order to allow me the liberty to just shoot with it and learn kind of the ins and outs. Initially, it was a nightmare to use that camera. I did not like my experience with the Sony FX3. Now we've incorporated into our client workflow. We've been using it for mainly for like events, because there's a lot of situations, again, that we're shooting in low light. We shot a short film recently in order to be able to play around with how it works as a short film ACAM. But yeah, we've been able to use it fairly thoroughly for the last, I'd say, year, 6 months. And I just want to give you guys my honest thoughts on the camera right now.
We're gonna get kicked out regardless.
Yeah, 100%. But we have to go ask for permission. I'm gonna try telling them we got permission from the 4th floor.
All right.
We'll see how it goes. Right now we're in the middle of like sort of a market inside here in Winnipeg. It's called the True North Market. It's super moody and absolutely love the aesthetics of this place. but usually it's very difficult to get some good shots because it's underexposed all the time. This is how I DIY tripod my everything. Who needs a tripod when you have a toque and a wallet? We're testing out a little bit of the dynamic range because there's going to be very little information in the shadows because it's super underexposed. But there is reflections obviously from the sun on the other side. When we get a little bit of definition on the outline of the subject in these kind of situations. Yeah, that shot's like, it's like super moody. Obviously I'm a sucker for silhouette shots. Let's talk about ergonomics. I feel like it's a really stylish looking camera. It looks super cool, to be honest. It's got that sort of like metal, gunmetal look. That being said, I think that it's not as easy to hold. It's not as comfortable in the hand as, say, for example, Canon. I felt like Canon, there's more padding, there's a little more rubber. It's a little bit more rounded, so it feels a little bit more comfortable in your hand. But it is square, and due to that, it's a lot easier, for example, when you're putting it into a cage or onto a gimbal. It's meant for filmmaking. I think that's where the shape kind of fits. It fits for that purpose. The buttons and the layouts are fairly intuitive. It's fairly easy. I love the big record button. You know you're recording because there's a light on every corner of the camera that's on, which I absolutely love. You know, just when you're shooting 2 cams with 1 person, 1 operator, it's nice to be able to look over and to be like, okay, that camera is still rolling. Great, awesome. Sometimes with the Canons, you can't really see them. One of the issues with the build and design of this camera is the fact that it is a metal body. There isn't as much rubber covering it, and so it doesn't operate very well in cold environments. Here in Canada, we can often be in situations for 3 to 6 months of the year where it's about -30 to -45 degrees Celsius. I had shot previously with the Sony in some of those situations and the camera just turned off after 10 minutes. I think there are workarounds, obviously putting heat around the things, you know, having an external battery, a V-mount battery, that kind of thing. Those things can all help. But it is something that just is a limitation that I don't like because we have to shoot in the cold so often here in Manitoba. Yeah, it is something that you have to consider if you are getting this camera. Tori's first ever latte.
Ugh. It's nasty.
What?
This just sucks.
Oh, just there's not sugar in it.
But it's trash.
This is not trash.
Garbage. Straight up horrible.
I'm overexposed technically looking on these meters. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's blinking it's blinking the 2.0, which is a little bit overexposed. So this is typically where I would expose at, and now everything looks kind of great, and we can just capture any shots. I'm just gonna try to snipe some shots here. It looks phenomenal, and it's great in this type of environment because you can get a really clean image, even in dark environments, and it's just something you don't have to worry about, which I absolutely love. So in terms of ergonomics, I think that it's a fairly light camera, it's fairly maneuverable. Pros and cons, again, but I think it's a great camera, specifically for filmmaking. Low light performance is obviously where it shines. Being able to just flick it up to 12,800 ISO and then just ending down according to what you need is an absolute game changer. There's still some noise at those levels. They're just reduced, so you still have to get some correct exposure. You gotta watch your shadows. There's still less noise at 800 ISO, but it is vastly superior to other cameras when you're pumping it up to 12,800 ISO. We exclusively shoot at those 2 ISOs, and that's what I would recommend for anyone who's switching to the camera. Don't try to go in between. This is the best look you're going to get. And honestly, because it has that flexibility of low light performance, it just removes a layer of stress. You know, I'm not showing up to an event being like, oh, I don't know how that's gonna turn out. For the most part, it's relatively stress-free. We know it's going to operate. We know we're gonna be able to get some decent footage and some decent low light, and just overall, it makes for a easier time preparing and actually shooting. All right, we got kicked out as predicted. The dynamic range. I think that's one of the things that also attracted me to the Sony. The ability to be able to pull more information from the highlights is something I've really learned to appreciate. It makes it more cinematic. You don't have like the blown out highlights in the background from the lights or the windows and things like that. It makes for a better image. It's prettier, it's moodier, you can grade it better. It allows for more flexibility and again, an easier time when you're actually on set in order to expose correctly. So overall, I think that it just gives a little bit of a nicer look. It's very inspiring to be able to shoot with a camera that gives such a good image, and a large part of that, in my opinion, is due to the dynamic range of this camera. Another part that I've started to enjoy about the Sony And the Sony ecosystem has actually been their UI. Just like any camera system, the moment you learn the system, I feel like it gets pretty easy. They also did a few firmware updates since I got the camera, which have made it easier to use. And so I absolutely love that. Things I absolutely love about this camera is being able to change our file names. It's just very handy to be able to change the file names, so then when you're looking at them in your Finder afterwards, it's easier to spot when you're searching for them just through the Finder or on your computer. I think it just makes for a more professional sort of experience while using the camera. The UI is relatively easy to understand. You just got to spend a little bit of time obviously learning the menus in and out. Now, let's talk about colors. Honestly, it's made shooting and color grading and editing a lot more fun, but it is a little bit more technical. It's not as easy as just Canon where you can just slap a LUT and then do some exposure changes and you're good. You will have to learn some color grading techniques. You will have to learn how to convert to Rec 709 and then doing some adjustment changes from there. But definitely something you want to look into before getting into the camera. And as you get the camera, shoot a lot of different scenarios where you get to practice color grading before you actually get a paid gig, because you will hate your life at that point. A few other cons that I have about the camera is the LCD screen. It's not really good. It's really hard to see, and oftentimes we don't bring a monitor with us, which we should probably moving forward. It is a little bit inconvenient to have to bring a monitor all the time, and it's just hard to see the exposure, and the colors aren't as nice, and it's not really that bright. So that's a little bit of a bummer for this camera. Another thing is the batteries tend to die fairly quickly. I understand that we're demanding a lot out of the camera, but it is dying fairly quickly. So if you are getting this camera, I do recommend that you purchase a few extra batteries as backups, because they will drain fast. Other than that, after using the Sony Fx3 for about a year, I have to say that it's probably the camera that's now gotten me the most inspired to create. This has brought me to become more curious and enjoy the creative process and learning color grading. And there was definitely some hesitation and some bumps along the way, but I think that overall this camera is a phenomenal camera. I would recommend it to anyone who's serious about getting into filmmaking. We just ordered a second one because we needed it for shoots and we were getting some demands for it. It's definitely a camera that I enjoy using. Those are my overall thoughts about the camera. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the camera, I know I sure did. So feel free to post them in the comments below. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Yeah, we'll be posting a few more videos about the FX3 in the near future, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.